Two biological males have won gold medals in the Olympic boxing competitions. We're going to talk about all of this and more on today's episode. Welcome to the Reconcile podcast. I hope you guys are having a great week so far. So before we dive into the Olympics, I wanted to take a minute and just clarify something from last week and just talk about a few of the comments that I was getting, the main arguments and the pushback that I was getting on my YouTube short about my episode last week on the Israel-Hamas conflict. So one of the main things that I was getting was about where Palestine came from, about that people group and the history of that land. So I did want to clarify that last week when I talked about Palestine, what I said was that this is when they changed the name of Israel to Palestine was from the Roman Empire when they were oppressing and occupying that area. But the word Palestine did actually exist before that, but it still remains true what I said last week, that it's only referencing a very general area of the Middle East. And it would be like us in the United States saying, we're going to the Midwest. Well, that doesn't really have borders. It's not an actual government or even necessarily a defined group of people. So that is the case with the word Palestine. It did exist before the Roman Empire. They didn't actually create the name and the word Palestine. But what they did after the Jewish insurrection, which I said last week, is they renamed that area as an insult to the Jewish people. And so, of course, I had people completely missing the point and still commenting on that short, which is totally expected, but saying things like Free Palestine. And when I specifically talk about the peace treaties that they tried to negotiate, where Israel gave up more and more land over the last 100 years to negotiate for peace, one of the things people kept saying was that wasn't their land to offer in the first place. So I do want to just take a second and talk about that and the truth behind that. I had one person even mention the Canaanites, which is just honestly, it's so absurd. Are you really going to reference the Canaanites, a group of people that existed thousands of years ago that we read about in the Bible, and say that that equivocates to the Palestinian people today? That is not the same. I do know the history of that land from reading the Bible because it's in the Bible. And if you really want to talk about the Canaanites and where God takes the land away from them and gives them to the Israelites and has the Israelites wipe them off the face of the earth, well, that was an extremely evil group of people. But also the interesting thing behind that is that I watch a lot of debates online with Frank Turek, and he has excellent videos on YouTube that he talks about this with people. He goes to college campuses and he gives these presentations. And this is often something that people will bring up, trying to imply that God is not actually good because of something like this in the Bible. But what they don't actually know is what the Canaanite people were doing, or how evil that they were, and how many chances God gave them, and the way that they were called to repentance and ignored that. But one of the things that the Canaanite people were doing, if you would just like one example, is they were, and I'm sorry, this is definitely not appropriate for children at this point, but I'm just going to be blunt and clear about what the history was of that people group. They were sacrificing newborn children, newborn babies, on idols that they had placed in fires, and so they would burn the baby alive. They would place it on this idol as a sacrifice to their god Moloch. So this is the kind of people group that you're talking about thousands of years ago, and because of those people, you're going to say that the Israelites have no claim on this land. That's crazy. What are we going to start doing now with every country? Just start tracing it back thousands of years and then justify the murdering of the other people group to say that this is actually our land and you need to get out? Come on. Come on, y'all. That doesn't make any sense. But let's actually talk about the history a little bit of that area, just in reference to actual Palestinians today and the Israelites. So they've always inhabited that parts of that land, both people groups, because you can trace these people groups back to Abraham. These two people groups came from Isaac and Ishmael, Isaac being the promised son of Abraham, and Ishmael was the son of the servant when Abraham disobeyed God and wanted to run ahead of God to fulfill the promise that was given to him. So, yes, I understand the history of that land. But what I think is important to note is that they both inhabited that land for thousands of years. And so let's fast forward a little bit to like modern history, okay? Because I'm not going to break down every time where exactly boundary lines were or what nations existed outside of Israel. But in modern history, the Jews left that area, not all of them, but a good majority of them, when they were occupied by the Romans because of great persecution that they were under. The Romans were just slaughtering them and oppressing them so badly that they left, and many of them went to Europe and North Africa and different, they were scattered in a lot of areas, but there always remained Jewish people in that area. And then, so now you fast forward to the Holocaust, and they have to flee again, another place that they've settled. So you want to talk about an oppressed people group, a people group that have been just absolutely ran over throughout history. It's the Jews. So now they have to leave Europe and places that they've settled because they're being mass murdered again through the Holocaust, through actual genocide. So remember, there's still Jews in this area, but it wasn't, they were just all kind of commingled. The Muslims, the Jews, the Palestinians, all of these people groups were just kind of commingled in this area. There wasn't really a lot of structure there. But then after the Holocaust and the Jews started to come back down and wanted to settle back in their homeland with their other people that were already there, that is when the influx of vitriol and hatred started from certain sets of Muslims that did not want them there, that did not want to share the land with them. And then that's when kind of all the peace treaties start and they try to negotiate. So again, I'm going to put this map up on the screen right now, and you can see this is a better map than what I showed last week. You can see how small of a portion of this land that Israel is in comparison to these Palestinian Muslim nations that surround them. And then also something I learned just this week, I had heard about this, but I wanted to make sure that I had the information accurate before I presented it to you. But just another little tidbit of information that's really interesting, and that is a good talking point when you're speaking to someone that is pro-Palestine, which is really pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist group, is that the Jews can't even pray. And this also speaks to the history of the land as well. The Jews can't even pray in their own Temple Mount in Jerusalem. So this Temple Mount is the site where the original temple was built by King Solomon in 957 BC. Okay, so that was the original temple. It was destroyed. Another one was built and destroyed in, they think, around AD 70 after Jesus was crucified and resurrected. So, but that's what the Temple Mount is sitting on today. So that historic and a very holy and significant site for the Jewish people, they can't even pray in their own Temple Mount, only at one of the walls of the temple, because of violence against them from Muslims that say that, no, this is actually our holy site. Well, here it gets even more interesting. The reason they claim that as their holy site is not because they built it. It's not because they owned it first. It's because Muhammad, the founder of the Islamic faith, had his vision there in 610 AD. So you're talking about roughly 1,500 years difference of the Israelites built their first temple on this site versus Muhammad and him having this vision 1,500 years later, and now the Muslims try to say that this is their holy site. Can you imagine just for a second If the Jewish people invaded an Arabic nation and they took over a mosque that had been there for thousands of years, that was a holy site for the Muslims, and said, actually, we're going to kick you all out and you can't even pray here anymore. Can you just imagine for a second? So this is all just going to tell you and to show you that you cannot just simply say that, oh, this land belonged to the Palestinian people. It's not that simple, and it's not actually true. And if you are on this side, you are on the side of terrorist groups. That's just simply what it comes down to. You are on the side of the group that actually does commit genocide and would continue to commit genocide if they could, if given the opportunity. But that's what they did on October 7th. You do remember that. You do realize that, right? So it's just this moral signaling that drives me absolutely crazy that the left does, because it's always a projection. They say that we're doing, or Israel or whatever side that they're against, they're saying that they're doing something that actually they are the ones doing. Like, they say Israel commits genocide when they go above and beyond any nation in modern history to prevent civilian deaths. They say they're committing genocide, they're killing all these people, they're oppressing all these people, they're occupying all these people. That's actually what Hamas is doing. It's always this projection and this trading the truth of God for a lie, or the truth of reality for a lie. So I wanted to address that, and I wanted to give some more clarity and some more history there so that you really understood the word Palestine, that I understand that Palestinian people existed before 610 AD when the Muslim faith was established. I do understand that. But the difference is that, at least in modern history, and I would say that this is most likely true throughout all of the history of this land, although I didn't study every single nation that has existed or been established in that area, but at least for modern history, the Israelites wanted to and had the ability and the desire to found and establish a sovereign nation, a good, functional nation. And you've got the Palestinian people groups that, again, unfortunately, are ruled by these terrorist groups that don't actually care about them. There was a leader of Hamas that said he was willing to allow as many Palestinians to die as they needed to bring about the Hamas political agenda. They don't care about their own people. But so that's the reason that when you've got these groups coming to the table trying to establish these peace treaties, trying to have a two-state solution, which their leaders are not interested in, that you've got one nation that is able to and has established a very high functioning and good society versus the other side that can't even manage to rule their own people because they have no interest in it. They don't care about building infrastructure for their people, supplying water to their people, which the Israelites have done to Gaza, by the way. If you did not know that, they've provided water to Gaza. So they're not interested in that. And if you really want to know my thoughts on it, they aren't capable of building a good and functioning society, because at the core of their religion, which plays a huge part in their societies, in their nations, it's not like here where Christianity is just kind of thrown away, even though it's very clearly how our nation was established as a Christian nation with Christian values. That's not how it works there. This is very ingrained in their society, and their very religion says to murder people that will not convert to their religion. I read that last week from their own religious text. Okay, you can't build out of destruction like that. So again, I just wanted to clarify that on Palestine and bring you just even a little bit more of the history so that you can really understand when you're having these conversations. Or if you're listening to this and you're confused and you're on the side of Palestine, you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be. It's the side of terrorists. It's a side of an actual hateful and racist group of people. Okay, now we're going to get to the actual story that I want to cover today, which is the Olympics. And there's a lot of things to say about the Olympics. Obviously, I'm sure most of you are aware of the opening ceremony and the drag queens and all of that. Now, it's been admitted by the people that put this on, that created this, that it was in some ways meant to look like the Last Supper. There were a lot of people saying, no, this was just the Feast of Dionysus, and this was just showing the Olympian gods and some festival or feast from them. But it's actually been admitted to by the people that created this. And also, it's just sad to see depravity hoisted up on a world stage as something to be celebrated. It's just sad because we've worked so hard. Christians over since the time of Jesus have come so far to really, in a lot of the world, especially the Western world, creating this Christian-based society. So it is sad to see when this depravity is hoisted up as some kind of example and something to be celebrated. And also, it's just inappropriate. It's just inappropriate. It's just gross. Like, people had their children watching the Olympics. This is something that, people have gathered around for a long time and watched with their family and tried to celebrate their countries and being proud of where they're from. And it's just inappropriate. But that's enough about that. There's a lot of information and opinions circulating about that. So the main thing I want to cover is, but also I will say too, there have been a lot of athletes that have talked about God and the gospel when they win, and that is amazing. And I love to see that. So I also wanted to just at least give a shout out to those athletes. That is incredible. There was even one woman, I can't remember her name, but she sang a hymn and it was so beautiful. Like, she's just a beautiful person and she just sang that hymn and it was so incredibly beautiful. So yes, there were also good things going on. We didn't really watch it. I never really have. I used to watch soccer because I grew up playing soccer, but once they got really political and, obviously I talked about Megan Rapinoe on this show a few weeks ago, like that was kind of the start of all of it, and Abby Wambach. Once they got political, I just lost interest in it. And then also just becoming a mom and having a career that I used to have and everything, I just lost interest. So we didn't really watch it. I just saw clips on social media and some highlights, but I think it's fine if you watched it. I don't think it's this moral signaling call that we had to boycott the Olympics because of the openers. I understand if you did, but also I think it's fine either way. Sometimes you just have to filter things out that you don't appreciate or you don't like. All right, but moving on to this story, we've got two males, biological men, that won gold medals in the female Olympic boxing competitions. I know that some of you may be saying, oh my gosh, we really have to talk about this crazy gender stuff again, because I'm sure you've seen it circulating of what's going on with this and the outrage and the disgust that people have felt. But here's why I think it's important to talk about this. Because as much as you may know the truth, and I know the truth, there are a lot of professing Christians that don't understand why this is important, that don't understand the truth of God's word, that he made us male or female and that is a good thing, that don't understand that men should not be competing against women. And that's common sense to us, but I promise you there are a lot of people out there that do not understand that. But the second reason I wanted to cover this is because mainstream media sources, I'll put this up on the screen here, they're still calling this man a woman. They're still calling him a her, and they're even saying that this is a fact check and that it's incorrect. This has been confirmed by the International Boxing Association that this is a man. Genetically, biologically, scientifically, this is a man. That's what they're all about, right? Is the science. Remember, we heard that a few years ago with COVID, to trust the science. Trust the science. But yet, when it doesn't serve them, they like to ignore it and throw science out the window. It's very convenient. But this is Imane Khelif. And we're going to mainly focus on him, even though there was another biological male, Lin Yu Ting of Taiwan. But we're going to mainly focus on Imane Khelif. So if you did not see this, there was a fight between him and an Italian boxer where she lasted, I think it was roughly 45 seconds. And she said that that was the hardest she'd ever been hit in her life. It was very sad. She left the stage crying because she's worked for this for a very long time, worked towards this goal, and she was hit by a man. You do realize that in most sane societies, that's called domestic violence. But there were people actually applauding this and celebrating this. So this is something that we have to talk about. If you Google it, it says that this is not a man and that that's incorrect. And so obviously these men won the gold medals. Of course they did. They're men competing against women. This only highlights the hypocrisy of their argument. Like they try to say that there's no difference in men and women, male and female, and yet all of these competitions where men are competing against women, they're winning. If it was actually fair, don't you think there would be some women competing against men and winning? But it's not fair because there are biological differences between men and women. And it's also ironic that they try to say that there's no difference in men and women. But when somebody tries to transition to be the opposite sex, what are they doing? They're cutting off body parts that are indicative of being that other sex. It completely falls apart. It's like a self-defeating statement when people say, well, there is no truth. And you can just say, is that true? It's the whole reason that the documentary by Matt Walsh was so famous and popular and infamous in some circles because he asks a very simple question of what is a woman? And nobody can answer it without saying the word woman because they don't want to admit that there are biological markers, there are physical markers of being a man or a woman, which you actually admit to when you try to transition. Because if there's no difference, then why would you be changing your body? Why would you be going on these cross-sex hormones? Why would you be having this quote unquote gender affirming care or gender transition surgery? It doesn't make any sense. It all falls apart because it's not logical and it's not true. But here's an article that highlights an Olympic boxing trainer, Rafa Lozano, and where he revealed his thoughts about this. He says, I don't see it as fair. Everyone can think what they want, but I don't, but that's how I see it. And he's recalling his observations of the Algerian, which is Imane Khelif, he's from Algeria, during a training retreat at the Sports Center in Madrid. So this is another direct quote from him. They were doing a retreat at Bloom. Not sure if I'm saying that correct. It's in Madrid, so I'm probably not, but it's Blume. They were doing a retreat at Bloom, and we couldn't put her with anyone. We put Khelif with Jennifer Fernandez, and it hurt her. Whoever we put Khelif with was injured. Lozano says that to avoid further injury to the women, the coaches ended up pairing Khelif up with Jose Quiles, who is one of Spain's top male boxers during the retreat. Quiles, 26 and one of Spain's top boxers, was considered a more equitable match for Khelif to spar with Lozano noting that Khelif was only quote-unquote even after being matched against the man. Of course he was, because he's a biological male. Now, I know that I've seen a lot of people saying that Khelif was raised as a girl, that he believes he's a woman. Now, that's been called into question because remember, Algeria is a Muslim nation, and there's a certain way that women typically act and dress in Muslim nations. So this has been called into question, but let's just for the sake of the argument, let's say that he was raised as a girl. Let's say that he believes that he's a woman now. We can have compassion for that without trying to alter reality to suit someone's feelings. Because here's the reality of it. Whether they believe they are women or not, Imane Khelif has something called a DSD, which is a disorders of sex development. And they were disqualified from a women's world championship for having XY chromosomes. So the fact of the matter is this DSD is a male disorder. and he is genetically a male. They did genetic chromosomal testing, and it came back with XY chromosomes, which means that genetically you are a man. XX is woman. So we can have compassion for this person having a disorder, possibly even believing that they are a woman. But we do not sacrifice women and their opportunities and their sports and their safety on the altar of a man's feelings or their confusion. So this is the same thing that Allie Beth Stuckey on her podcast Relatable talks about all the time, this toxic empathy. And she has a book coming about it out about it this fall, that specific topic. And I'm excited to read that. But I've listened to her talk about this a lot. And this is what this boils down to, is that if we're going to have empathy to the point where we are twisting reality and harming other people, that is toxic empathy. That's not real empathy. That's not real love. The loving thing to do is to have him compete with an appropriate competitor that genetically matches him, and to treat him for any gender confusion that he might have with biblical counseling and biblical truth, because that is the only thing that we know is going to bring about lasting peace and joy in his life, is the truth. Satan is the one that comes to kill, steal, and destroy, and sometimes he does that by lying to us. He is the father of lies. And we can also see this played out in I quoted this a few weeks ago, the longest study ever done on people that actually went through quote unquote gender transition. And I say that because I always use the quotes because I don't believe you can actually change your gender. You can't change your gender. We can see that the true love is to speak the truth, because when people go through this quote unquote gender transition or gender affirming care, they are 20 times more likely to commit suicide. And you're going to sit here and tell me that it's not loving to tell him the truth, that he is a man and that is good how God made him, and because of living in a fallen world, he has this genetic disorder, but there can still be peace and joy and hope for him in Christ. You're telling me that that's unloving, but the loving thing to do is to lie to someone and actually encourage them to walk down this path that makes them 20 times more likely to want to end their life? That is not loving. The loving thing to do is agree with God, is to speak the truth in love. I say this all the time. You cannot only have truth and you cannot only have love. You have to have both. And it is a balance. We don't want to beat people over the head. We don't want to be overly aggressive or act without self-control or with hatred or vitriol in the way that we speak. We want to be kind and caring and compassionate, but also firm in the truth, because that is the most loving thing to do. When you're speaking the truth, you are caring about someone's not just temporal circumstances, but their eternal outcome. What is going to be the decision when they stand before God someday and they have to answer for their life? And when he asks, well, I don't know that God asks this, but we hear this analogy given a lot, or this question posed to people a lot of, what would you say if God asked you, why should I let you into heaven? The only answer is to be covered by the blood of Jesus. Our righteousness is rags. It is trash before him. We don't have it without Jesus. So we have to care about people's eternal outcomes more than temporarily hurt feelings. And another aspect of this is caring about the person that is confused and believing a lie more than the actual women. There are women that have worked their entire life to get to this point. This is the pinnacle of being an athlete, to go to the Olympics and compete for a gold medal. This is something people have trained and spent hours of their life on, and their energy and the love of these sports. I've experienced it. I'm sure many of you have. And that was stolen from them because they were competing against a man that is confused. And we actually celebrated that. What about the women? This is what the left does so often, is they are on the side of the person that is confused or lying or evil. They don't care about the women in this circumstance. Where's the compassion and empathy for them? It doesn't exist. So let's not sacrifice women, erase women on the altar of men's feelings. Let's speak the truth in love. I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you next time.